Wherever you are right now, however you arrived at this moment, you are welcome here. You can settle in. You can let the day fall away, let go of whatever came before this, and simply be where you are. Before we begin, feel free to share what time it is and where you're listening from. Tonight, we are going to explore something that touches all of us. That quiet feeling, sometimes loud, sometimes barely a whisper, that something in life is not quite okay. Maybe it lives in the chest. Maybe it sits in the shoulders. Maybe it is just a background hum you have carried for so long you have almost forgotten it is there. And yet, across centuries of gentle wisdom, teachers and seekers have discovered something remarkable. Not that the difficult feelings disappear, not that life becomes easy, but that there is a place within us where it is okay, where it has always been okay. Tonight, we will walk gently through stories and teachings that point toward this quiet truth. There is nothing you need to do, nothing to figure out, nothing to fix. Just rest and listen, and let whatever arrives be welcome. Thank you for joining us here at Midnight Monk. Let us begin. A master was once asked by a student, "What is the most important thing?" The master replied, "You are already it." The student looked puzzled and said, "Then why don't I feel it?" The master smiled, "Because you are busy being something else." Tonight, as you settle in, let us begin with that simple wonder. What if the most important thing about you is something you never lost, but simply forgot? There is a lovely story about a woman who taught art at a college. She had spent years studying color and form, learning the careful language of brushstrokes and composition, earning her degrees and her place at the front of the classroom. She was good at what she did. She loved it. One evening, she was at a gathering with friends. It was a warm night, and the house was full of conversation and laughter. Her young daughter was there, about 4 years old, sitting on the carpet nearby, drawing with crayons while the grown-ups talked above her. The girl was making something with a lot of purple in it. She was completely absorbed. At some point, the conversation turned to work, as it always does. One of the friends leaned down to the little girl and asked, in that bright way adults speak to children, "Do you know what your mummy does?" The girl looked up from her drawing. She had heard this before. "She teaches art," the girl said proudly. "That's right," her mother said, smiling. "I teach art at a college. I help grown-ups learn how to draw and paint." The girl put her crayon down. She tilted her head in that way children do when something does not quite make sense. Her brow furrowed slightly. She looked at her mother, then at the other adults, then back at her mother. And then she asked, with the most genuine confusion in her voice, "You mean they forgot?" The room went quiet for a moment. No one quite knew what to say. The adults smiled at each other, that uncertain smile people offer when a child has said something accidentally profound. "You mean they forgot?" There is something in that question that reaches deep. Because to a 4-year-old, art is not a skill. It is not a subject you study or a talent you either have or do not have. To a 4-year-old, drawing is like breathing. You just do it. You pick up a crayon, and what comes out is a sun with legs, or a purple horse, or a house where everyone you love lives together, and it is wonderful. It never occurs to a small child that she might not be an artist. And yet somewhere along the way, most of us stop. We look at what we have drawn, and we compare it to something else, something better, something more correct. We hear a voice, maybe from a teacher, maybe from a classmate, maybe from inside our own heads, that says, "That does not look right." And slowly, so slowly we do not even notice, we put the crayons down. We step back from the paper. We begin to believe that art belongs to other people. But the little girl did not know any of that yet. She only knew what was obvious to her. Everyone draws. So if grown-ups need to be taught, they must have forgotten. This is such a gentle teaching, and it reaches far beyond art, because it is not only drawing that we forget. We forget all sorts of things about ourselves as we grow. We forget how to play without a purpose. We forget how to rest without guilt. We forget how to look at the sky and feel that it is enough. And perhaps most importantly, we forget that we are, at our core, already whole. The Buddha spoke about this often. He taught that our true nature is not something we need to build or earn. It is already here, the way the sun is already shining behind the clouds. We do not create the sun. We simply notice when the clouds thin, and there it is, as it always was. But we do not walk around feeling whole, most of us. Instead, we walk around carrying stories. Stories about who we are, who we should be, who we are failing to be. I am not patient enough. I am not successful enough. I am too much of this, not enough of that. And these stories become so familiar, so deeply worn into the pathways of our thinking, that we mistake them for the truth. The Buddha called this a kind of forgetting. Not forgetting a fact, like forgetting where you left your keys, but a deeper forgetting. Forgetting what you are. Getting so tangled in the stories about yourself that you lose contact with the living, breathing reality underneath. There is a beautiful way one teacher described it. He said that our ideas about ourselves are like a frozen fragment, just a tiny sliver of the whole, captured in a single moment, held still. And we carry that frozen fragment around as though it were the complete picture, as though a single photograph could capture a river. But you are not a photograph. You are the river. And to show you what that means, let us listen to a story written by a young boy, only about 10 years old. He was given an assignment at school. His teacher gave him a sentence and asked him to write an essay explaining what it meant. The sentence was this: every living thing is a world performance. Now, that is a complicated sentence for a young mind. But here is what he wrote. Every living thing is a world performance. This is a very complex sentence, meaning that anything that lives is never the same as it was a second ago. If you pick a flower, you are not seeing the whole of its life. You are just looking at one of the many stages in its lifetime. A caterpillar will become a butterfly, as I will become an adult. A dandelion will create a new performance by the wind blowing away the grey seeds, as I will create a new performance by having children. Let those words settle for a moment. If you pick a flower, you are not seeing the whole of its life. Think about that. Imagine a wildflower growing at the edge of a meadow. Right now, in this moment, it is in bloom. Its petals are open. The color is bright, catching the light of a late afternoon. A small bee lands on it and then lifts away again. But just a few weeks ago, this same flower was a tight green bud, closed against the morning cold. And before that, it was a seed no bigger than a grain of sand, buried in the dark earth, waiting. It did not know what it would become. It did not need to know. And in a few days from now, the petals will begin to curl. The stem will bow. The seeds will scatter on the wind, each one carrying the possibility of another meadow. Each of these is a performance. Each of these is the flower being fully itself. None of these stages is more real than the others. The seed is not less the flower than the bloom is, and the bloom is not more the flower than the scattered seeds. They are all the flower, in motion, unfolding. And it is the same with you. The person you were this morning is not quite the person you are right now, listening to these words in the quiet. The person you were 10 years ago, or 20, is a different performance of the same life. You are always in motion, always unfolding, always becoming something you have not been before. This is why our stories about ourselves can never be the whole truth. They are snapshots taken from a moving train. They capture something real, yes, but they freeze it. And life does not freeze. Life flows. The Buddha taught that one of the deepest sources of our suffering is this: we cling to a fixed idea of who we are, and then we measure ourselves against it constantly. We carry this image around, tucked somewhere behind the eyes, and whenever reality does not match the image, we feel that something is wrong. Not with the image, with us. Am I successful enough? Am I kind enough? Am I doing this right? There is a quiet monitor running in the background of our minds, always checking, always comparing. And because the image is frozen and life is not, the two can never quite match. So the monitor keeps sounding its little alarm. Something is off. Something needs fixing. Something is not okay. But what if nothing is wrong? What if you are simply a living thing in the middle of a world performance, and the performance is still unfolding? What if the feeling of not okay is not a signal that you are broken, but simply the friction between a frozen story and a living life? There is a quiet teaching in Zen Buddhism that says, in the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities. In the expert's mind, there are few. This is the very thing the little girl understood without anyone telling her. She still had her beginner's mind. She had not yet learned to limit herself. She had not yet built that inner monitor that checks and compares and judges. She had not yet learned to say, I am this kind of person and not that kind. When we are very young, the world is full of open doors. Every color is worth trying. Every shape is interesting. Every song is worth singing, even if the words are wrong. But as we grow, we begin to close those doors, one by one. We learn the rules. We learn the categories. We learn which doors are for us and which are not. And before long, we are living in a house with most of the doors shut, and we have forgotten they were ever open. But the beautiful thing is, beginner's mind is never truly gone. It cannot be destroyed. It can only be covered over, the way snow covers a garden in winter. The garden is still there beneath the white. The roots are still alive in the dark soil. And when the season turns, as it always does, everything grows again. So perhaps this is the first step toward learning to trust that life is okay, even when it does not feel that way. Not to fix ourselves, not to improve ourselves, but simply to remember what we already are. The great Zen master Shunryu Suzuki once said, "You are perfect just as you are, and you could use a little improvement." There is such kindness in that, such humor. It holds both things at once. Yes, you are growing. Yes, there is more to learn. And also, right now, in this very moment, before you change a single thing, you are enough. You always were. like the 4-year-old who never doubted for a moment that she was an artist, like the wildflower that does not ask permission to bloom, like the caterpillar that does not worry about whether it will be a good enough butterfly. You are a world performance, and the performance is beautiful, not because it is perfect, but because it is alive. We carry so many ideas about who we should be, and these ideas, however well-meaning, however reasonable they might sound, have a way of pulling us out of the present moment. They take us away from the living experience of being here, right now, in this body, breathing this breath. When we believe too tightly in our stories about ourselves, we stop being the river and start being the photograph. We stop flowing and start gripping. And that gripping, that holding on, is often what creates the feeling that something is not okay. Not the circumstances of our lives, but the tightness with which we hold our ideas about them. So tonight, as you rest, you might notice a story about yourself drifting through your mind. Some idea about who you are or who you are not. And if it comes, you do not need to push it away. You do not need to argue with it or fix it. You can simply notice it the way you would notice a leaf floating past on a stream. There it goes. And here you still are. The stream itself, still flowing, still whole. The Buddha taught a path of gentle attention, not forceful concentration, not straining to see something hidden, but simply a kind and patient willingness to notice what is already here. Like turning your face toward the sun and feeling its warmth. You do not have to create the warmth. You only have to stop turning away from it. So let this be your practice for now. Rest here. Let yourself be the river for a little while. Let the stories float by without holding on to any of them. And perhaps, just for a moment, you might feel what that little girl knew without being taught, that you never lost what matters most. You only forgot, and remembering is always possible. Let us pause here for a moment. Notice how you are feeling. There is no right way to feel. And whenever you are ready, we will continue together. In Buddhist tradition, there is a difference between two kinds of knowing. The first is knowing about something. You can know about water. You can study its chemistry, draw its molecular structure, read about rivers. The second kind of knowing is tasting it, feeling it cool against your lips when you are thirsty. These are very different things. And what we are exploring together tonight is not the first kind. It is the second. We are not studying trust. We are tasting what it might feel like to rest in it. So let us taste something now. Let us step into a story. Somewhere in a wide open landscape, far from any city, a group of people gathered for a ceremony. It was a tradition that had been carried for generations, passed down from elders to children, and from those children to their own children, stretching back further than anyone could count. The ceremony took place inside a small rounded structure, close to the earth. A fire burned at the center. Water was poured over heated stones, and steam rose thick and warm into the dim space. The air was heavy. It pressed against the skin. It filled the lungs. It was the kind of heat that asks you to surrender, to stop resisting, to simply let go and be held by something larger than yourself. The people sat in a circle around the fire. Some had done this many times before. Others were new and uncertain, their breath shallow, their hands gripping their knees. No one spoke for a long while. The only sounds were the hiss of water on stone and the soft crackling of the fire. Then the elder who was leading the ceremony spoke. He was an old man with deep lines around his eyes and a voice like slow-moving water over smooth rock. He did not speak often, but when he did, people tended to remember. He said, "In our language, there is no word for hope." He let that settle. The steam curled upward. Someone shifted in the dark. "The reason," he continued, "is that our people trust that life is fine just as it is. No word for hope. Not because these were people without hardship. Their history was full of it. Not because they had never known loss or struggle or grief, but because somewhere in the deep roots of their understanding, they had arrived at something beyond hoping. They had arrived at trust. Not the trust that everything will go the way we want, but the trust that everything, even the difficult things, belongs. It is a striking idea, is it not? Most of us live our lives on hope. We hope things will get better. We hope tomorrow will be easier. We hope the worry will pass, the relationship will heal, the restless feeling will quiet down. And there is nothing wrong with hope. It carries us through hard times. But there is something underneath hope that is quieter and more solid. Hope says, "It will be okay later." Trust says, "It is okay now." And these are very different places to stand. The Buddha understood this deeply. His entire teaching began with a simple, honest observation. Life includes difficulty. Not as a punishment, not as a mistake, but as part of its nature. Rain falls. Wind blows. The seasons turn, and not all of them are warm. He called this the first noble truth, and it was not meant to be discouraging. It was meant to be a relief. Because when you stop being surprised by difficulty, when you stop treating it as evidence that something has gone wrong, something inside begins to relax. Think of it this way. Imagine you are walking along a forest path, and you know that the path sometimes goes uphill. You have been told. You can see the hills ahead. When the ground begins to rise beneath your feet and your legs start to work a little harder, you do not panic. You do not think the path is broken. You simply walk. You adjust. You breathe. The hill is part of the path, not a flaw in it. This is what the Buddha was pointing to. Difficulty is part of the path. And the moment we truly understand that, we stop fighting the hills. We stop wasting our energy being surprised or offended by them. And all that energy we were spending on resistance, it becomes available for something else. For presence. For care. For simply being here. Now, this raises a question that matters very much. If trust is so natural, if it runs so deep in some traditions that they do not even have a word for its opposite, then why is it so hard for most of us to feel it? The answer is simpler than we might expect. We have learned not to trust ourselves. Not in one dramatic moment. Not because of a single event. But slowly, over years, through 1,000 quiet lessons, we learned that our feelings were too much, that our needs were inconvenient, that our sadness made people uncomfortable, that our joy was too loud. Bit by bit, we learned to hold ourselves at arm's length, to watch ourselves from a suspicious distance, always checking, always measuring. There is a story sometimes told in Buddhist circles about a young monk who came to his teacher one morning looking frustrated. The teacher asked him what was wrong. "I sat in meditation for an hour," the monk said, "and my mind would not stop wandering. I kept thinking about food, about the weather, about a conversation I had 3 days ago. I could not focus. I failed. The teacher looked at him kindly. How many times did your mind wander? She asked. The monk thought about it. Maybe 100 times, he said, embarrassed. And how many times did you notice it had wandered? The monk paused. 100 times, he said slowly. Then you did not fail 100 times, the teacher said. You succeeded 100 times. Each time you noticed, you came back. That is the practice. That is trust. You see, we have been taught to see the wandering as failure. But the noticing, the gentle return, that is where trust lives. We just rarely give ourselves credit for it. The Buddha noticed this same pattern in the people who came to study with him. He saw how they carried invisible burdens of self-doubt. He saw how their minds were always running a quiet calculation. Am I doing this right? Am I enough? And he taught that this suffering does not come from life itself. It comes from the tight grip we keep on our ideas about how life should be. He called this grasping, and he said it was like holding a fist clenched around sand. The tighter we squeeze, the more it hurts, and the less we actually hold. The third thing he taught was that letting go is possible. Not letting go of life, not giving up or going numb, but letting go of the grip, opening the fist. And when we do, what we find is not emptiness. What we find is space, room to breathe, room to feel, room to be here without the constant pressure of needing things to be different. There is a lovely image in the Buddhist tradition. Imagine you are carrying a very heavy stone. You have been carrying it for so long that your hands have cramped around it, your shoulders have hunched forward, your whole body has shaped itself to the weight. And someone says to you, gently, you can put that down now. At first, you might not even know how. Your fingers have been gripping for so long that letting go feels strange, almost frightening. What will you hold? What will you do with your hands? Who are you without the weight? But then you set it down. And what you notice first is not freedom or joy or any grand feeling. What you notice first is relief. Simple, quiet relief. The ache in your shoulders beginning to ease. Your spine straightening a little. Your breath coming a little deeper. That is what the Buddha meant by the end of suffering. Not fireworks. Not ecstasy. Just the deep, quiet relief of setting something heavy down. There is a beautiful reflection from a Buddhist teacher that captures this well. When asked what would be most helpful for people in the modern world, he said simply, trusting in the power of your own heart and awareness to awaken through all of life's circumstances. Notice what he did not say. He did not say trust that nothing bad will happen. He did not say trust that your problems will disappear. He said trust in the power of your own heart. Trust that you have, within you, the capacity to meet whatever comes. Not perfectly, not without stumbling, but with enough awareness and enough kindness to find your way through. This is a very different kind of trust from the one we usually think of. When most people hear the word trust, they think of trusting other people. Trusting that a friend will keep a secret or that a partner will be honest. And those are real and important. But the trust we are touching here is more foundational. It is the trust in your own being. The trust that you can sit with discomfort without being destroyed by it. That you can feel sadness without drowning in it. that you can face uncertainty without needing to immediately fill it with answers. This kind of trust is not built through willpower. You cannot force yourself to feel it by repeating affirmations in a mirror. It is built the way a path through a meadow is built, one step at a time. Each time you sit quietly with a difficult feeling instead of running from it, the path gets a little clearer. Each time you notice a harsh thought about yourself and choose not to follow it, the ground becomes a little more solid beneath you. It is not dramatic. It is not sudden. But it is real, and it holds. And this is something the Buddhist tradition has understood for thousands of years. That transformation does not come from grand gestures. It comes from small, repeated acts of presence. The monk who sits each morning on her cushion is not doing it because each session is a revelation. Most of them are quite ordinary. Knees aching, mind drifting, the same old worries looping around again. But she sits anyway. And over time something shifts. Not the world around her, the ground within her. She begins to trust that she can be with whatever arises. She has done it before, many times, and she can do it again. This is the quiet miracle of attention. It does not change what is there. It changes our relationship to it. The hill is still a hill, but we are no longer afraid of hills. Let us return to that circle of people sitting in the warm steam, in that ancient ceremony. The elder had spoken his words and then gone quiet, and the silence that followed was not empty. It was full of heat and breathing and the awareness that something true had been said. No word for hope, because trust runs deeper than hope. Hope looks ahead, always reaching for something not yet here. Trust looks at what is here, right now, and says, this is enough. This breath, this heartbeat, this moment, with all its imperfection and beauty and ordinary mystery. And perhaps the most comforting part of this teaching is that trust does not require us to be brave. It does not ask us to be fearless. It simply asks us to be willing to stop running for just a moment, willing to set down the heavy bundle of our worries, even briefly, willing to consider the possibility that right here, right now, in the middle of everything, it is okay. The Buddha put it simply. He said, "You yourself, as much as anyone in the entire universe, deserve your love and affection." That is where trust begins. Not out there. Not in some future when everything is sorted out and all the problems are solved. But right here. In the willingness to be kind to yourself in the middle of the mess. Think of trust as a kind of homecoming. Not arriving at a new place, but returning to one you forgot you belonged to. The elder in the ceremony did not teach his people something new that night. He reminded them of something ancient, something they already carried in their bones. And perhaps, as you listen now, you can feel a faint echo of that same remembering. A quiet voice beneath all the noise saying, "It is okay. You are okay." Not because everything is perfect, but because you are here, and that is enough. You do not have to do it all at once. You just have to be willing to start. Let us rest here for a moment. Take a breath and let it go slowly. Feel whatever you feel. There is no hurry. Whenever you are ready, we will continue on together. A poet once wrote something that has stayed with many people for over a century. He wrote, Perhaps all the dragons in our lives are princesses who are only waiting to see us act, just once, with beauty and courage. Perhaps everything that frightens us is, in its deepest being, something that needs our love. That is where we are going now, toward the things we have been afraid to look at. But gently, always gently. In Buddhist teaching, there is a practice called metta, which is usually translated as loving kindness. It is one of the oldest meditations in the tradition, and the way it works is simple. You begin by offering kindness to someone you love, then to someone neutral, then to someone difficult, and then, finally, to yourself. Many people find that last part the hardest. It is a curious thing, is it not? Most of us can find it in our hearts to be kind to a stranger. We can wish well for a friend without thinking twice. We can even, with effort, soften towards someone who has frustrated us. But when it comes to turning that same warmth inward, toward ourselves, something tightens. Something resists. A voice rises up and says, "No, not yet. Not until you earn it. Not until you fix what is broken. Not until you become the person you are supposed to be." It is as if we believe there is a version of ourselves that deserves kindness, and we are not it. Not yet. Maybe someday, but not now. Now we need to try harder. This voice is what we might call the dragon at the door. It stands between us and our own heart, and it has been standing there for a very long time. Let us explore a story. There was once a woman who, by all outward appearances, had a kind and generous life. She was gentle with the people around her. She listened well. She gave more than she took. But inside, she carried something heavy, a feeling she could not quite name, though she had lived with it for years. It sat in her chest, low and constant, and when she was honest with herself, she knew what it was. She did not trust herself, not in the way you might think. She was reliable. She kept her promises. She showed up when she said she would. But underneath all of that, she carried a quiet belief that she was capable of causing harm. She looked at her past, and she saw moments, real moments, where her words or her choices had hurt someone she cared about. Nothing monstrous, nothing headline-worthy, just the ordinary, painful ways that human beings sometimes wound each other. A thoughtless word, a moment of selfishness, a time she turned away when she should have stayed, and she could not let go of those moments. They lived in her, sharp and clear, even years later. She replayed them at night. She measured herself against them in the morning, and the conclusion she kept arriving at was simple and bleak. If I have caused harm before, I will cause harm again. So I cannot trust myself. She tried many things. She spoke with wise people. She read books. She looked for answers in philosophy and conversation and quiet walks through the countryside. And some of it helped, a little, for a while. But the feeling always returned. That low, heavy weight in the chest. Then she began to meditate. Not in any dramatic way. She did not go to a mountain or join a monastery. She simply started sitting quietly each morning, for 20 minutes, in a chair by her window. She followed her breathing. She noticed her thoughts. She tried, as best she could, to just be present. It was not easy. Some mornings her mind was a storm. Other mornings it was a fog. Some days she sat there and cried without knowing why. Other days she felt restless and bored and wondered what the point of all this was. But she kept sitting. Something in her knew that this was the right direction, even when it did not feel like progress. At first, it was not what she expected. She thought meditation would bring her peace, and sometimes it did. A few breaths of stillness, a moment where the noise dropped away, and there was just the sound of birds outside and the feeling of her own heartbeat. But more often, especially in the early days, it brought her face to face with the very things she had been trying to avoid. The guilt, the shame, the sharp, uncomfortable memories. Sitting still, with no distractions, there was nowhere left to hide. The dragon was right there. But here is what changed. Slowly, over many months, she stopped trying to get rid of it. Not because she wanted to keep it, but because she began to understand something the Buddha had taught. He said, "What you resist persists. What you look at with kindness dissolves." She could not make the guilt disappear by arguing with it. She could not logic her way out of shame, but she could sit with it. She could feel it in her body, in her chest, in her shoulders, without needing it to go away. And when she did this, something unexpected happened. Underneath the guilt, she found fear. Simple, ordinary fear. Fear of being a person who makes mistakes. Fear of being seen clearly. Fear of not being good enough. And underneath the fear, she found something softer still. A deep ache of caring. The reason she felt so much guilt about causing harm was that she cared so much about not causing it. The guilt was not a sign that she was bad. It was a sign of how much she loved. She had been guarding the door against a dragon. And when she finally opened it, what she found was not a monster. It was a part of herself that was frightened and tender and asking to be held. This is what the poet meant. The dragons of our lives are princesses. The things we fear most about ourselves are often, at their core, the things that need our love most urgently. There is a word in Buddhist tradition that carries great weight. The word is forgiveness. But in the Buddhist understanding, forgiveness does not mean saying that what happened was acceptable. It does not mean pretending that no one was hurt. It does not mean erasing the past or excusing carelessness. Forgiveness, in this tradition, means something closer to release. It is the moment you stop carrying the stone, not because the stone does not matter, but because your hands were not meant to grip it forever. The woman in our story came to understand this gradually. For a long time, she resisted forgiving herself. She worried that if she did, she would become careless, that the guilt was the thing keeping her in check, that without it, she would stumble into the same old patterns and cause more harm. But the opposite turned out to be true. When she began to soften toward herself, when she allowed even a little warmth into that cold, guarded place, she did not become careless. She became more aware, more sensitive, more present. The guilt had been like a clenched muscle, and when it relaxed, she could actually feel more. She noticed things she had missed before. The subtle shifts in a friend's voice. The quiet needs of the people around her. Kindness toward herself did not make her selfish. It made her more available to others. The Buddha taught this again and again. That compassion, Real compassion must include ourselves. It is not a special exception or an indulgence. It is the foundation. A lamp that has no oil cannot light a room. A heart that will not forgive itself cannot fully open to the world. There is a phrase that is sometimes shared in Buddhist communities, and it is one of those rare sentences that makes you laugh and then makes you very still. It goes like this: forgiveness is giving up, once and for all, absolutely all hope for a better past. Let that land for a moment. All hope for a better past. Because that is what we do, is it not? We carry our regrets around as if, by holding on tightly enough, we might somehow change what already happened. As if guilt could reach backward through time and undo a careless word. As if shame could rewrite a scene from years ago and make it come out differently. But it cannot. The past has already happened. It is complete. And no amount of suffering in the present will alter a single moment of it. The words that were spoken have been spoken. The choices that were made have been made. They belong to a version of us that no longer exists, because we, as we learned in our first chapter tonight, are always changing. Always in the middle of a new performance. What suffering in the present does do is keep us locked out of now. It keeps us living in a story about who we were instead of discovering who we are becoming. It keeps us gripping the old script so tightly that we cannot pick up the new one. There is a small parable sometimes shared among Zen students. Two monks were walking along a muddy road after a rainstorm. They came to a crossing where a woman in fine silk robes stood at the edge of a large puddle, unable to cross without ruining her clothes. Without a word, the older monk picked her up, carried her across, set her down on the other side, and walked on. The younger monk was stunned. For hours, he said nothing, but his face was troubled. Finally, as the evening approached, he could not contain himself any longer. "Brother," he said, "we are not supposed to touch women. How could you carry her like that?" The older monk looked at him calmly. "I set her down hours ago," he said. "Why are you still carrying her?" This is what forgiveness asks of us. Not to pretend the puddle was not there, but to set down what we have been carrying long after the moment has passed. Forgiveness does not change the past. It changes the present. It opens a door that has been locked for a long time and lets fresh air into the room. And on the other side of that door, there is not the carelessness we feared. There is tenderness. There is attention. There is the simple, steady willingness to be a little kinder, starting now. This is one of the most beautiful paradoxes in Buddhist teaching. We think that being hard on ourselves will make us better. We think that if we just criticize ourselves enough, we will finally improve. But the Buddha saw it differently. He saw that self-punishment does not lead to growth. It leads to contraction. It makes us smaller, more rigid, more afraid. And from that small, rigid, afraid place, we are actually more likely to stumble, more likely to react, more likely to cause the very harm we were trying to prevent. Kindness, on the other hand, creates space. And in that space, wisdom can arise. When we are not constantly defending ourselves against our own judgment, we can actually see clearly. We can notice what is happening. We can choose rather than react. This is what the Buddhist path calls wise action. Not action born from guilt, but action born from clarity and care. The Buddha once told his students, holding on to anger is like grasping a hot coal with the intent of throwing it at someone else. You are the one who gets burned. And what is true of anger is equally true of the anger we turn inward. The guilt we will not release. The standards we hold ourselves to that no living person could meet. These burn us from the inside, quietly, steadily, and they do not make us better. They only make us tired. So if there is a dragon at your door tonight, you do not have to slay it. You do not have to fight it. You do not even have to open the door all the way. You can just crack it open, just a little, and peek through. And you might find, as so many have found before you, that what is on the other side is not as frightening as you imagined. It might be sad. It might be tender. It might be a part of you that has been waiting a very long time to be seen. And seeing it, even for a moment, is enough. That small act of looking, of not turning away, is itself a kind of forgiveness. It is the beginning of trust. Not trust that you will never make a mistake again, but trust that you can meet your own imperfection with something warmer than judgment. The woman in our story did not wake up one morning and find that all her guilt was gone. That is not how it works. But she found that the weight was lighter, that she could carry it differently, that she could set it down sometimes and walk without it, and that when she picked it up again, as she sometimes did, she could hold it with softer hands. And that was enough. That was the beginning. Let us pause here gently. Take a slow breath. You are doing beautifully, simply by being here. Rest a moment, and when you feel ready, we will walk a little further together. There is a well-loved story, one you may know, about a group of travelers who journeyed a very long way to meet someone they believed was immensely powerful. They had been told that this great figure could grant them what they most longed for: courage, a heart, a home, a working mind. They crossed strange and beautiful lands to reach him, and when they finally arrived at his enormous hall, what they found was overwhelming. A vast chamber filled with smoke and green fire. A booming voice that shook the floor beneath their feet. A face, huge and terrible, floating above them in the haze. They were terrified. They fell to their knees. They believed every bit of it. All except for one small dog who had come along on the journey. The dog had been with them through everything, through the strange lands and the difficult roads and the long uncertain nights. And unlike his companions, he did not tremble. He did not kneel. He was not interested in the smoke or the booming voice or the giant floating face. Something in his simple animal nature saw right through it. He just did not buy it. So while everyone else was frozen in fear, the small dog trotted across the marble floor, his nails clicking softly in the vast echoing room. He walked straight to the side of the hall, where a heavy green curtain hung from ceiling to floor. He gripped the edge of it in his teeth and pulled. And behind the curtain was an ordinary man. A kind man, actually. A little embarrassed, a little flustered. Standing at a table full of levers and buttons and switches, creating all that noise and light because he thought that was what people needed to see. He thought they would not listen to an ordinary voice. He thought he had to be enormous to matter. The travelers stared. The smoke cleared. The fire dimmed. And in the quiet that followed, something shifted. Not just their understanding of the wizard, but their understanding of themselves. They realized that what they had been afraid of was not real. And more than that, they realized that what they had been seeking, the courage and heart and home they longed for, had been with them the whole time. It had never been missing. They had only been looking in the wrong direction. In Zen Buddhism, there is a phrase that has been passed down for generations: do not seek the truth. Only cease to cherish opinions. It points to the same thing as our story. We do not need to go looking for some grand and hidden wisdom. We only need to stop being so convinced by the smoke and noise of our own minds. Because we all have our own version of that great hall, do we not? We all live, to some degree, behind a curtain of thoughts. And those thoughts are convincing. They boom. They flash. They fill the room with their urgency. You are not doing enough. Something is wrong. You need to fix this. Hurry. Try harder. Watch out. And just like the travelers, we fall for it. We kneel before the voice and believe it is telling us the truth about our lives. But what if it is just a man behind a curtain? What if the booming voice is just our thinking mind doing what it has always done, making noise, telling stories, trying to protect us from something that may not even be there? There is a quiet humor in this that Buddhist teachers have always appreciated. One meditation teacher was known for wearing a shirt that read, "Meditation, it is not what you think." And that small joke carries a real teaching inside it. Because meditation, and indeed much of the Buddhist path, is not about thinking our way to peace. It is about noticing that we are thinking, and then gently, curiously, looking behind the thoughts to see what is actually here. Not what we think is here. What is actually here? These are surprisingly different things. There is a story about a bird watcher, a man who had spent years studying birds from books. He knew their names, their habits, their markings, their songs. He could identify dozens of species from a single feather. He was, by all accounts, an expert. One afternoon, he was walking through a stretch of woodland near a river when he spotted a bird sitting on a low branch. He raised his binoculars and looked carefully. The bird was small and brown with a flash of red along its wing. It sat very still, as if waiting to be noticed. He opened his field guide and began flipping through pages. Nothing matched exactly. The red was in the wrong place. The beak was a slightly different shape. The song, when the bird opened its mouth and sang, was nothing he had heard before. It was clear and bright and a little sad, rising up through the leaves into the cool air. He stood there for a long time, going back and forth between the bird and the book. The bird and the book. The bird and the book. His mind was working hard, trying to make the living thing in front of him fit into the printed description in his hand. Finally, something inside him relaxed. It was a small shift, barely noticeable. He closed the book. He lowered the binoculars, and he simply watched the bird with his own eyes, not trying to name it, not trying to fit it into a category, just seeing it, the way it tilted its head, how the afternoon light caught its feathers and turned the red to copper, the small, bright eye that seemed to be looking right back at him, patient and untroubled. He stood in that quiet for a long time, and for the first time in years of bird watching, he felt as if he was actually seeing a bird. Later, he told a friend about it. "I learned something important today," he said. "If you see a bird and it does not match the description in the field guide, believe the bird. Believe the bird. Not the book. not the theory, not the description someone else wrote down. Believe the living thing in front of you. This is what the Buddhist tradition asks of us, again and again. Trust your direct experience more than your ideas about your experience. Trust the breath in your body more than the story in your head. Trust the actual feeling of this moment more than the mental commentary about it. And this is harder than it sounds, because the commentary is constant. Have you ever noticed how much talking goes on inside your mind? Not out loud, of course, but silently, ceaselessly. A voice narrates your life as you live it. It judges. It worries. It plans. It replays conversations from last week and rehearses conversations for tomorrow. It tells you what you should have said, what you should not have done, what you need to be afraid of, what you ought to want. It has opinions about everything, about the food you ate, about the email you sent, about whether that person in the shop was rude or whether you were being too sensitive. It cannot leave anything alone. It picks things up, turns them over, puts them down, picks them up again. And the remarkable thing is how repetitive it is. The same handful of worries, cycling around and around like clothes in a washing machine. The same doubts, the same comparisons. Most of what the voice says today, it said yesterday and the day before that. One Buddhist teacher described it this way. He said, "Imagine someone followed you around all day, talking in your ear without stopping, commenting on everything, judging everything, repeating the same worries over and over. How long would you put up with it? Most of us would find it unbearable within an hour. We would walk away. We would close the door. We would beg for silence. And yet, we put up with it from our own minds every single day. We have been doing it for so long that we do not even notice anymore. The narration has become background noise, like a television left on in another room. We have stopped questioning whether what it says is true. We have stopped asking whether it is helpful. We have just accepted it as part of life. But it is not life. It is a description of life. And there is an enormous difference. In one of the oldest Buddhist texts, the Dhammapada, there is a line that says, "We are what we think. All that we are arises with our thoughts. With our thoughts, we make the world." This is not just philosophy. It is a precise description of something you can observe for yourself right now, in the quiet of this moment. Notice a thought, any thought. Maybe it is a worry. Maybe it is a plan. Maybe it is a judgment about how this listening session is going. Whatever it is, notice it. And then notice something else. Notice the space around the thought. The awareness that is holding the thought. You are not only the thought. You are also the one noticing it. This is what it means to pull aside the curtain. Not to get rid of the thoughts. Not to silence the inner voice. But to realize that you are bigger than the voice. You are the room it is speaking in. The small dog in our story did not defeat the wizard. He did not fight the smoke or argue with the booming voice. He simply walked over and looked behind the curtain. That was all it took. One small, honest act of looking, and the whole illusion gently fell apart. There is a Zen story about a student who went to her teacher in great distress. "I cannot stop my thoughts," she said. "I sit in meditation and they come and come and come. I try to push them away, but it only makes them louder. What am I doing wrong?" The teacher poured 2 cups of tea. She set one in front of the student and kept one for herself. Steam rose gently from both cups. Outside, rain was beginning to fall. "Tell me," the teacher said, "can you stop the wind?" "No," the student said. "Can you stop the river from flowing?" "No." "Can you stop the clouds from crossing the sky?" "No, of course not." The teacher sipped her tea and looked out the window at the rain. "Then why would you try to stop your thoughts? They are as natural as the wind. You do not need to stop them. You only need to stop believing that they are you." The student held her cup in both hands and sat with this for a long time. The rain grew heavier outside. The tea cooled. And then something in her face softened. It was not a dramatic change. Just a small easing around the eyes, a releasing of something she had been holding tight. "So I am not my thoughts," she said slowly. "You are the sky," the teacher said. "The thoughts are just weather." This is perhaps the most freeing teaching in all of Buddhism. You are not your thoughts. You are the awareness in which thoughts arise. You are not the voice behind the curtain. You are the whole room. The smoke, the light, the quiet space behind it all. And when you know this, even a little, even for a few breaths at a time, something remarkable happens. The thoughts lose their grip, not because they disappear. They are still there, talking away, doing what they have always done. But you are no longer kneeling before them. You are no longer convinced that they are telling you the truth about who you are. You are like the bird watcher who closed his book and looked up. Like the travelers who saw through the spectacle. Like the small dog who was never afraid in the first place. You are the sky, and the weather will do what weather does. But the sky remains. It has always remained. On the stormiest days, above the thickest clouds, the sky is still clear and open and vast. It does not struggle with the weather. It simply holds it all. As the Buddha himself said, in the sky, there is no distinction of east and west. People create distinctions out of their own minds and then believe them to be true. So tonight, if the inner voice is talking, let it talk. You do not have to follow it. You do not have to argue with it. You do not have to turn it off. Just notice it, the way you might notice rain against a window. It is there. It is doing its thing. And you are here, listening, breathing, resting in the wide open space that holds it all. Let the distinctions soften. Let the curtain fall open. What is behind it is not frightening. It is just the quiet truth of being here, alive, aware. And that, all by itself, is more than enough. Let us pause here. Let your breath settle. Notice the gentle rhythm of it without trying to change anything. When you are ready, we will move on together. There is an old proverb, centuries old, from a village tradition far away. It says, "Be humble, for you are made of dung. Be noble, for you are made of stars." Both things at once. Not one or the other. Both. You are of the earth. Your body is soil and water and minerals borrowed from the ground. You eat what grows from the dirt. You breathe air that trees have breathed before you. You are, in the most literal sense, made of the same stuff as earthworms and mushrooms and the dark, rich compost at the bottom of a forest floor. And you are also made of stars. Every atom in your body was forged in the heart of a star that burned millions of years before you were born. The calcium in your bones, the iron in your blood, the oxygen filling your lungs right now, all of it was once starlight. You are ancient beyond imagining. The proverb asks us to hold both of these truths with grace, to be humble about our earthiness, and to be noble about our vastness, to stand with our feet in the soil and our heads in the sky, and to feel at home in both places. But something has gone wrong with how most of us carry these truths, and this is where our journey takes us tonight. In Buddhist psychology, there is a teaching about the way we distort our own nature. The Buddha observed that human beings have a tendency to take something true and twist it into something painful. We do this with both sides of the proverb. Instead of being humble, grounded, at ease with our earthiness, we feel ashamed. We look at our imperfections and we cringe. We see our limitations and we feel embarrassed. We notice the messy, awkward, uncertain parts of ourselves and we want to hide them. Humility becomes humiliation. Groundedness becomes shame. And instead of being noble, feeling the quiet wonder of being alive and aware, we inflate. We puff ourselves up. We try to be special, to stand out, to prove that we matter more than anyone else. We chase status and approval and recognition. Nobility becomes grandiosity. Wonder becomes arrogance. And so we swing between these two distortions. Sometimes we feel too small. Sometimes we try to feel too big. And neither one is restful. Neither one is home. The Buddha saw this pattern clearly. He taught that both shame and arrogance come from the same root, the belief that we are a separate self, cut off from the world around us. When you feel separate, you feel incomplete. And when you feel incomplete, you either collapse inward or you reach outward, desperately trying to fill the gap. But the gap was never real. It was created by the belief itself. Let us explore a teaching that comes from an elder of a native tradition. He was speaking about the difference between people who feel connected to the land and people who do not. He said something like this: "Those who do not understand the earth are too far removed from it. The roots of their lives have not yet grasped the rock and the soil. And because of this, they are troubled by deep fears." It is a gentle observation, but it cuts to something essential. When we are disconnected from the earth, from nature, from the living world around us, we become afraid. Not afraid of any one thing in particular, just afraid. A low, background anxiety that hums through everything. A sense that we are unsupported, that we are on our own, that we have to figure it all out by ourselves and protect ourselves from everything. Have you ever stood barefoot on grass and felt something loosen inside you? Have you ever sat beside a river and noticed your breathing slow down without trying? Have you ever looked up at the night sky and felt, just for a moment, that you belong to something so much larger than your worries? That feeling is not sentimental. It is not a luxury. It is a recognition, a remembering. You are not separate from the earth. You are part of it. You grew out of it, as naturally as a tree grows from soil, and you will return to it, as gently as a leaf falling from a branch. There is a story about a Buddhist monk who lived in a monastery in the mountains. He was a serious practitioner, very dedicated, very disciplined. He meditated for hours each day. He studied the scriptures. He followed every rule. And yet, something troubled him. He could not find the peace that his teachers spoke of. It was always just out of reach. He tried harder. He sat longer. He ate less. He slept less. Still, peace eluded him. One morning, frustrated and exhausted, he left the meditation hall and walked outside. It was early spring. The sun was low. The air was cold and sharp. Without thinking about where he was going, he walked down the mountain path and into a grove of old trees. The ground was soft with fallen needles. Birds were calling somewhere above him. He sat down at the base of a tree and leaned back against it. He was not meditating. He was not practicing anything. He was just tired. He closed his eyes and felt the bark against his back, rough and solid. He felt the cool earth beneath him. He heard the wind moving through the branches overhead. And sitting there, without effort, without trying, something opened. Not a grand revelation. Nothing dramatic. Just a quiet settling, as if some part of him that had been clenched for years finally let go. He felt the tree holding him. He felt the earth supporting him. He felt, for the first time in a long time, that he did not have to do anything at all. Later, when he returned to the monastery, his teacher asked him where he had been. "I sat with a tree," the monk said. His teacher smiled. "And what did the tree teach you?" The monk thought for a moment. "That I have been trying to get somewhere I have never left." In Buddhism, this understanding is called interdependence. Nothing exists on its own. Everything arises in relationship to everything else. The flower depends on the rain. The rain depends on the ocean. The ocean depends on the sun. And you depend on all of it. You are woven into the fabric of the world so thoroughly that to pull you out would be to unravel the whole cloth. The great Zen teacher Thich Nhat Hanh used a simple word for this. He called it interbeing. Not just being, interbeing. You inter-are with the clouds and the soil and the person sitting next to you on the train. Nothing is separate. Everything belongs. And yet we walk around feeling separate most of the time. Why? The Buddhist answer is direct. It is because of our thinking. We think ourselves into separation. Every time the mind draws a line between me and not me, it reinforces the feeling that we are alone on one side of that line. Every time it says my body, my feelings, my life, it creates the sense of a small owner who possesses these things, rather than a living being who simply is these things. The ancient Buddhist teachers noticed something interesting about this. They saw that the sense of being a separate self is not one big belief. It is built, moment by moment, out of thousands of tiny thoughts. Each thought lays another brick. I like this. I do not like that. This is mine. That is not. I am here. You are over there. Brick by brick, thought by thought, we build a wall around ourselves and then wonder why we feel enclosed. And the wall is not even solid. It is made of air. If you look closely at any single thought, it has no weight, no substance. It arises, it lingers for a moment, and it passes. But we do not look closely. We just keep building. There is a difference between saying, "I have a body," and saying, "I am alive." The first creates distance. A subject over here, an object over there. The second dissolves the distance. There is just aliveness, just this breath happening, just this warmth in the chest, just this awareness, open and present, with no border around it. The Buddha described the sense of a separate self as the deepest of all illusions. Not because you do not exist, you clearly do, but because the way you exist is not the way you think you exist. You are not a solid, fixed, independent thing bouncing around in a world of other solid, fixed, independent things. You are a process, a flowing, a verb pretending to be a noun. And when that pretending relaxes, even a little, what opens up is remarkable. The anxiety loosens. The constant monitoring slows down. The sense of needing to protect and defend and prove yourself begins to quiet. Because who would you be protecting? What would you be defending? If there is no fixed self to guard, then the guard can rest. There is a practice in many Buddhist traditions that points toward this. It is very simple. Rather than thinking about your body, you are invited to feel it from the inside. Not to look at your body from the outside, the way you might look in a mirror. Not to think about whether it is to this or to that. Not to judge it or compare it or wish it were different. But simply to sit inside it and feel what it feels like to be alive, right now. Feel the weight of yourself against whatever you are resting on. Feel the air against your skin. Feel the rise and fall of your chest, not as something you are observing from a distance, as something you are. There is no gap between you and this breathing. There is no separation between you and this warmth, this tingling, this quiet pulse of being. This is what Zen teachers sometimes call the body within the body. Not the body you think about, the body you inhabit, the one that has been here all along, breathing without your permission, beating its heart without being asked, keeping you alive through every distraction and every worry and every long night. It does not need your approval. It does not need your judgment. It has been faithfully doing its work since before you had any opinions about it at all. And here is something beautiful. When you come home to the body in this way, the old questions about trust begin to answer themselves. You do not have to figure out whether life is okay. You can feel it, right here, in the steady rhythm of your breathing, in the warmth of your hands, in the quiet fact that you are alive and aware in this moment, and that nothing more is required of you. The monk under the tree did not think his way to peace. He felt his way to it. He stopped building the wall and simply sat where he was. And the earth held him. It was always holding him. He just had not noticed. When we reconnect with the body in this way, something surprising happens. The old proverb starts to feel less like a contradiction and more like a simple truth. Yes, you are of the earth. You can feel it, the heaviness of bone, the warmth of blood, the soft animal fact of being a creature on this planet. And yes, you are of the stars. You can feel that too. The spark of awareness behind your eyes. The mystery of consciousness itself. The fact that you are here, at all, against all odds, aware and wondering, humble and noble. Earth and stars, both held together in a single breath. In one of the Buddha's most famous teachings, he compared the mind to a vast, clear sky. Clouds pass through it, storms cross it, the sun blazes and the moon rises, and the stars appear and disappear. But the sky itself is never stained by any of it. It holds everything without being damaged by anything. And your body is the earth beneath that sky. Solid, patient, alive with roots and water and the slow, steady work of growing. Together, the earth and the sky make a whole world. And that world is you. You do not need to choose between humility and wonder. You do not need to shrink or inflate. You can simply be what you are, a creature of earth and stars, breathing quietly in the dark, connected to everything, separate from nothing. As the Buddha once said, just as a mother would protect her only child with her life, even so let one cultivate a boundless love toward all beings. And that love begins, always, with the being you are right now. This body, this breath, this tender, ordinary, extraordinary life. Let us rest here a while. Feel the ground beneath you. Feel the quiet. You are held, even now, by something larger than you know. When you feel ready, we will continue. If you have ever sat beside a river, you know that it never stops. Even when it seems still, it is moving. Beneath the surface, currents are shifting, carrying small stones along the bottom, pulling warmth from the sun and cold from the deep. A river does not try to flow. It does not make plans about which direction to go next. It does not worry about whether it is flowing correctly. It simply moves, following the shape of the land, and everything it touches is part of its journey. The Buddha spent a great deal of time near rivers. He taught beside them. He used them as images for the deepest truths he wanted to share. And one of the things he kept returning to was this: life is a river. It moves. It changes. It never stops. And the suffering we feel is not because the river is flowing. It is because we are trying to stand still in the middle of it. There is a funny observation that captures this perfectly. Someone once said, "We think we are holding the steering wheel. Actually, we are gripping the rearview mirror." Think about that for a moment. We go through our days convinced that we are in control of our experience, that we are steering it, that if we just plan carefully enough, worry thoroughly enough, hold on tightly enough, we can direct the whole thing where we want it to go. But have you noticed how rarely that works? The morning starts with a plan, and by noon the plan has been replaced 3 times. The meeting does not go as expected. The weather changes. The person you were counting on says something that surprises you. The feeling you thought had passed comes back on a Tuesday afternoon for no particular reason. And there you are, gripping the mirror, staring at where you have already been, wondering why the road ahead looks nothing like what you imagined. We spend so much energy on this. So much of our day is taken up with the effort of controlling things that were never ours to control. The mood of the person across the table, the outcome of a situation we have done our best with, the way we feel when we wake up in the morning. We grip, and we are exhausted by evening, and we are not even sure what we were holding on to. In Zen practice, there is an invitation that sounds almost too simple. It says, let go of the steering wheel. Let go of the mirror. And notice that the river is carrying you just fine. This is not passivity. It is not giving up or going limp. It is something much braver than that. It is the willingness to stop managing your experience and start participating in it. To stop being the director of the film and become one of the people in it. To let yourself be surprised. To let the current take you where it takes you, and to trust that where it takes you is where you need to be. This takes courage because our whole culture tells us the opposite. It tells us that letting go means losing, that if you are not in control, you are in danger. But the Zen tradition gently, persistently says, look at the river. Is the river in danger? Is the rain in danger? Is the wind? They are not in control of anything, and they are not in danger. They are simply alive, doing what living things do. Moving, flowing, being. When we stop trying to possess our experience, something beautiful begins to happen. The boundaries between us and life begin to soften. The hard line between me in here and world out there starts to blur. You may have felt this before, even without knowing what to call it. Perhaps you were listening to music and for a moment there was no listener and no music. There was just listening. Or perhaps you were walking through a forest in autumn and you forgot, just for a breath or two, where you ended and the forest began. The colors were not something you were seeing. They were something you were part of. The crunch of leaves was not a sound happening to you. It was happening with you. These moments pass quickly, and we often dismiss them as daydreams. But in Buddhist understanding, these are moments of waking up. Moments when the grip loosens and we slip back into the stream where we belong. Sounds arrive and we do not just hear them. We become the hearing. Sensations move through us and we do not just notice them. We become the feeling. The breath rises and falls and we are no longer someone watching the breath. We are the breathing itself. This is what Buddhist teachers mean when they speak about the end of separation. Not that you disappear, but that you expand. You become less like a stone sitting in the river and more like the water itself. And when that happens, even difficult feelings change their quality. The sadness is no longer my sadness. It is just sadness. The ache is no longer my ache. It is just aching, the same aching that every person has felt, that every creature has known. It belongs to life, not to any single one of us. And there is a quiet comfort in that, a feeling of company, a feeling of not being alone with it. There is a tender story, almost like a poem, about a parent and a young daughter walking together through a garden one afternoon. It was the kind of afternoon that seems to stretch out endlessly, warm and golden, with bees drifting between the flower beds and the smell of cut grass in the air. They walked slowly, as children insist on walking, stopping at every flower, every stone, every beetle crossing the path. The girl wanted to know everything. What is that flower called? Why is it that color? Where does the bee go when it flies away? Her mother answered as best she could, but the questions came faster than the answers. At one point, the girl looked up with a different kind of expression. More serious, more curious. What are earth roots? She asked. The mother thought about this for a moment. She knelt down so she was at her daughter's height. Earth roots are a special connection, she said. a thread that joins us to every living thing. Earth roots join me to you, and you to the birds, and the birds to the flowers. Everything is connected by these roots, even if we cannot see them. The girl nodded seriously. She was holding something in her cupped hands, very carefully, the way children hold things they know are precious. It was a small bird with a hurt wing. She had found it beneath a hedge, trembling and still. She looked down at the bird and then back up at her mother. "Can earth roots make the bird fly again?" she asked. The mother knelt down closer. "In time," she said gently, "the bird can become a rose, and the rose can take wing. Earth roots make all things possible." The girl did not fully understand this, but she held the bird a little closer, felt its heartbeat against her palm, and kept walking. Years later, when she had a daughter of her own, she understood. She saw the thread. She felt how the bird was joined to the rose, how her child was joined to her, how every living thing was woven into one fabric, trembling and whole. She understood because she was no longer thinking about earth roots. She was living them. When we let go of control, wonder arrives on its own. It does not need to be manufactured. It does not need to be forced. It simply appears the way stars appear when the sun goes down. They were always there. We just could not see them in the glare. Children know this naturally. Their wonder has not yet been covered over by the habit of managing everything. And sometimes their honesty can catch us off guard in the most gentle way. There is a tradition of collecting the small notes and letters that children write when they are first learning to express their big questions. Some of these are so simple and so clear that they stop you in your tracks. One child wrote, "Did you mean for the giraffe to look like that, or was that an accident?" Imagine the child who wrote that, sitting at a small desk, pencil in hand, looking at a picture of a giraffe and thinking, really thinking, about that long neck and those spotted legs and those small horns, and concluding, quite reasonably, that this might have been a mistake. There is such honest seeing in that question. Another wrote, "It is okay that you made different religions, but don't you get mixed up sometimes?" And one small girl wrote, "Thank you for the baby brother. But what I prayed for was a puppy." There is something in these that goes beyond humor. These children are looking at the world without the filters that adults carry. They are seeing things freshly, as if for the first time. They are noticing what is actually here, rather than what they have been told should be here. And in their questions, there is a trust so complete that it does not even know it is trust. It is just the natural way of being in a world that has not yet been divided into categories of safe and unsafe, right and wrong, acceptable and unacceptable. This is what they see because they are still in the stream. They have not yet climbed out onto the bank to watch and judge and manage. They are still in the water, still flowing, still part of it all. And from inside the stream, everything is interesting. Everything is alive. Even the giraffe is worth a question. The Buddha called this quality of seeing clear seeing, not seeing through a lens of judgment or expectation, just seeing what is. And he taught that this kind of seeing is available to all of us, at any age, at any moment. We do not have to become children again. We just have to set down, for a moment, the heavy apparatus of our opinions and look, really look, at the sky, at our own hands, at the face of someone we love, at the small, ordinary miracle of being here at all. There is a line from an ancient Buddhist text called the Sutta Nipata. It says, "As a mother watches over her child, so with a boundless heart should one cherish all living beings, radiating kindness over the entire world." Notice that it does not say, "Think kind thoughts about all living beings." It says, "Radiate, like heat from a fire, like light from a candle, not doing, but being, not directing, but flowing." This is what happens when we become the stream. Kindness is no longer an effort. It is what flows through us when we stop blocking it. Gratitude is no longer something we work at. It is what arises when we stop taking things for granted. Wonder is no longer something we search for. It is what appears when we stop filling every moment with plans and opinions and commentary. Have you ever noticed how grateful you feel after a close call? After a long illness fades? After a difficult time finally passes? In those moments, the simplest things become extraordinary. A cup of tea, a warm bed, the sound of someone you love laughing in the next room. These things were always extraordinary. We just forgot because we were busy gripping the rearview mirror. The stream does not forget. The stream just flows, and everything it touches is made new. Every rock it passes over, every bank it brushes against, every small stone it carries gently along. And trust, the trust we have been exploring all evening, is no longer something we build. It is what remains when we stop doubting. It was always there, underneath the effort, underneath the worry, underneath the need to control. Like a river that has always been flowing, even when we thought we had to push it. Like a bird with a hurt wing that will, in time, find its way to the sky. Like a child who writes her deepest questions in crayon, trusting completely that someone is listening. Let us rest here for a little while. Let the current carry you. You do not need to steer. You do not need to grip anything at all. Just float, gently, and whenever you are ready, we will take one more step together. The desert is the quietest place on earth. If you have never been to one, it is hard to describe what that silence feels like. It is not the absence of sound. It is the presence of space. Vast, open, unhurried space that stretches in every direction, broken only by the curve of a ridge or the shadow of a canyon wall. The light out there is different too. Clear and sharp in the morning, golden and heavy in the late afternoon, and at night, the stars are so bright and so close that you feel you could reach up and brush them with your fingers. It is the kind of place where your thoughts get very quiet, because the landscape is so much bigger than anything your mind can hold. There is a story about a man who went to the desert for a long retreat. He was a meditation teacher, and he had gone there to lead a group through 10 days of silence and practice. But in his free time, he liked to walk. Long, wandering walks through the canyons and ridges that surrounded the retreat center. One afternoon, he walked further than he meant to. The canyons twisted and branched, and one ridge looked much like the next. The sun was beginning to lower. Shadows were pooling in the valleys. And slowly, without quite realizing when it happened, he understood that he was lost. It is a particular feeling, being lost in a big landscape. The chest tightens. The breathing shallows. The mind starts racing, running through options, calculating distances, arguing with itself about which direction is right. He could feel all of this happening inside him, even as the desert around him remained perfectly calm. The rocks did not panic. The sky did not worry. Only his mind was in distress. He walked for a long time. He tried one direction, then another. He climbed a ridge and saw nothing familiar. He climbed another and saw nothing but more desert, more canyons, more of the same beautiful, indifferent landscape stretching out in every direction. Eventually, as the light turned amber and the air began to cool, he found his way back. It took longer than he would have liked, and he arrived tired and shaken. But he arrived. That evening, a friend at the retreat center said to him, "Let me show you something." He took the man outside and pointed to the top of the main building. There was a tall spire rising from the rooftop, visible for miles. It caught the last of the evening light and gleamed. "You can see this from anywhere," his friend said. "Whenever you are out walking, just turn around. Find the spire, and you will know the way home." After that, the man walked with a different feeling. He still wandered far. He still explored the canyons and followed the ridges wherever they led. But there was an ease in his step that had not been there before. A freedom, because he knew that no matter how far he went, no matter how lost things seemed, he could always turn around, find the spire, and find his way back. He walked with great abandon after that, not because the desert had changed, but because he trusted that he had a way home. This is perhaps the simplest and most comforting teaching in all of Buddhism. You will get lost. It is certain. You will wander into the canyons of your thoughts and lose your way. You will get caught in old stories. You will believe, for a time, that something is terribly wrong. You will forget everything you know about presence and trust and okayness, and you will grip and worry and struggle, just as you always have. This is not failure. This is being human. The Buddha did not teach that awakening means never getting lost again. He taught that awakening means knowing you have a way home, and the way home is always the same. It is this moment, this breath, this gentle turning of attention from the story in your head to the feeling in your body, from the panic to the ground beneath your feet. Just turn around, find the spire, come home. There is a story about a group of people who went on a silent retreat. It is not the kind of story with a single hero. It is a story about many people, ordinary people, who sat together in silence for 10 days and paid careful attention to their experience. The first few days were difficult for nearly everyone. Bodies ached from sitting still. Knees protested. Backs tightened. Restless thoughts buzzed and circled like insects around a lamp. Old emotions rose up, things that had been buried for months or years, surfacing in the quiet, like stones appearing in a receding tide. Some people felt grief they had not expected. Others felt frustration, a hot impatience with themselves, with the silence, with the whole process. Others felt a deep, heavy tiredness that seemed to come from somewhere far beneath the surface, as if the body was finally admitting how exhausted it had been. In the meditation hall, you could feel it, a kind of weather moving through the room. Some mornings the air felt heavy. Some afternoons it felt electric. The silence was not peaceful, not at first. It was charged with everything people were carrying. And then, gradually, something shifted. Not all at once, not dramatically, but with a gentle, almost invisible turning. It was like dawn. First, just a faint lightness at the edge of the sky, then a warmth spreading. Then, slowly, color returning to the world. What happened was simple, though it did not feel simple to the people going through it. They kept paying attention. They did not try to fix what they were feeling. They did not push anything away or pull anything closer. They just stayed with it, breath by breath, moment by moment, with as much kindness as they could find. And as they did, something opened up inside them. A sense of room, a feeling that whatever was arising, however uncomfortable or unfamiliar, there was space enough to hold it. The pain was still there. The sadness was still there. The worry was still there. But it was no longer the whole picture. It was more like weather passing through a wide sky. Present, real, felt. But not everything. Not the whole sky. Just clouds moving through. And with that space came something unexpected. A quiet confidence. Not confidence in the sense of knowing what would happen next, but confidence in the sense of knowing they could be with whatever happened. Not a thought about it, a feeling of it, deep in the body, a feeling of, I can handle this, or even simpler than that, even quieter, a feeling of, it is okay. It is okay that my back hurts. It is okay that my mind wanders. It is okay that I do not have all the answers. It is okay that life is uncertain and messy and sometimes confusing. It is okay. One man at the retreat, a gentle fellow in his 70s, wrote a small poem after the 10 days were over. It went something like this. My back hurts, and now I know that is okay. I came a long way to truly feel that my back hurts, and that is okay too. I will not be here forever, and now I know that is okay. I came a long way to truly feel that I will not be here forever, and that is okay too. There is so much in those few lines. A whole journey. A man who arrived carrying the weight of discomfort and uncertainty, and who left carrying the same weight, but holding it differently. Not fighting it, not denying it, just resting with it gently, the way you might rest your hand on the shoulder of someone who is struggling and say, quietly, I am here. It is all right. This is what the Buddhist path offers. Not the removal of difficulty, but the transformation of our relationship to it. The discovery that we are large enough to hold it all. That we always were. The Buddha once said, do not dwell in the past. Do not dream of the future. Concentrate the mind on the present moment. And this is not a command. It is an invitation, a gentle pointing toward the only place where trust lives. Because trust does not live in the past. The past is finished, and all the regret and analysis in the world cannot change it. And trust does not live in the future. The future has not arrived, and all the planning and worrying in the world cannot secure it. Trust lives here, in this breath, in this heartbeat, in this small, unrepeatable moment that will never come again. Each time we return to the present moment, even for a few seconds, we are building something. Not with effort, not with strain, but with a kind of quiet repetition, like footsteps wearing a path through long grass. The first time, the grass barely bends. The second time, a faint line appears. The 10th time, the 20th, the 100th, and there is a clear path. A way home, visible and trustworthy. And here is the beautiful secret that the Buddhist tradition has held for over 2,000 years. You do not need to do this perfectly. You do not need to be present all the time. You do not need to meditate for hours or reach some extraordinary state. You just need to come back, again and again. 5 seconds of honest presence can shift something deep inside you. 5 seconds of setting down the story and feeling what is actually here. That is enough. That has always been enough. A Zen master was once asked, "How long does it take to change your life?" He said, "1 breath." Not a lifetime of discipline. Not years of study. 1 breath, taken with full attention. 1 moment of honest presence. That is how long it takes to come home. And each time you do it, the path gets clearer. The next time you get lost, it takes a little less time to remember. The fear lasts a little shorter. The grip loosens a little sooner. Not because you are becoming a better meditator or a more spiritual person, but because you are learning, in the quietest and most natural way, to trust yourself, to trust that you can be with this life just as it is, without needing it to be different. This is the gift. Not perfection, not an end to difficulty, but a deep, unshakable knowing that you are okay, that you have always been okay, that the okayness was never something you had to earn. It was something you had to remember. The man in the desert learned to walk with freedom because he knew the spire was there. He did not stop getting lost. He still wandered into unfamiliar canyons. He still sometimes felt the tightness in his chest when things looked uncertain. But the fear did not last as long. Because he knew. He always knew. Just turn around. Find the spire. Come home. And this is what practice gives us. Not perfection. Not an end to wandering. But a deep, growing trust that we have a way back. That no matter how far we drift into our stories, no matter how lost we feel in the desert of our thoughts, we can always stop. We can always ask, what is true right now? We can always feel our breath, feel our body, feel the ground beneath us. And we are home. The awakened heart is not somewhere far away. It is not on a mountaintop or at the end of a long journey. It is right here. It has always been right here, beating quietly in your chest, waiting with infinite patience for you to notice. As the Buddha said on the night of his awakening, wonder of wonders, all beings are already whole. They only do not know it. You are already whole. You only forgot for a little while. And now, gently, breath by breath, you are remembering. Let us rest here now. There is nothing more to do, nothing more to figure out. Just this breath, just this quiet, just you, here, held by the earth, lit by the stars, part of everything, separate from nothing. Let your eyes close if they have not already. Let the story settle. Let the river carry you. You are home. There is a small story, barely a story at all, about a boy who came to play one afternoon at a friend's house. He was about 8 or 9 years old. He arrived after school, and the afternoon unfolded the way afternoons do, when you are that age. Running in the garden, building something out of sticks, arguing about the rules of a made-up game and then forgetting the argument entirely. The kind of afternoon that has no edges to it, that just spills forward from one moment to the next without anyone keeping track. But then it was time to go home, and the boy did not know how to leave. This is a common affliction among children. The visit is over, the light is changing, supper is being prepared, and everyone can feel that the moment has come. But the child lingers. He finds one more thing to show. He starts a new game. He asks a question that does not need asking. He is standing right at the border between staying and going, and he cannot bring himself to cross it. The mother of the house noticed. She liked the boy. He was sweet and a little shy, and he had a way of laughing that made everyone else laugh too. But supper was nearly ready, and her own children had homework to do. She hinted, gently, that perhaps his mother might be expecting him. "She might be wondering where you are," she said kindly. The boy nodded slowly. "Yes, probably," he said. But he did not move. She tried again a few minutes later. "It's getting late, love. You should probably head home." "Okay," the boy said. And then he picked up a stick and started drawing in the dirt. By now, the family was beginning to feel that awkward mix of warmth and desperation that comes when you care about someone but also really need them to leave. They looked at each other. They looked at the boy. Nobody wanted to be unkind. Finally, he was standing on the other side of the screen door. The evening light was coming in low and warm through the trees. He could hear the sounds of the kitchen behind him, the clatter of plates being set on the table, a conversation starting up, someone laughing at something, the ordinary music of a household settling into its evening rhythm. He tried to say goodbye. He really tried. But it came out thin and uncertain, and he stayed there, standing on the wrong side of the door, looking in. And then the mother said, warmly, with no plan behind it, just simple human kindness, "Well, come and see us again." And the boy opened the door and walked back in. There is something in that moment that needs no explanation. We feel it before we understand it. The boy did not need permission. He did not need an invitation, not really. He needed to know that the door was open, that he was welcome, that he belonged, and the moment he felt that, he did not hesitate. He walked right in. In Buddhism, there is a teaching that says we spend most of our lives standing on the other side of a door, looking in at our own life, feeling as if we are somehow outside it, as if belonging is something that happens to other people, as if home is somewhere we have not yet arrived. But the teaching also says that the door was never locked. It was never even closed. We just believed it was, and so we stood outside, waiting for someone to let us in. The boy knew something that most adults have forgotten, that belonging is not earned. It is not a reward for good behavior or a prize for being enough. It is simply what happens when you stop believing you are on the outside. There is a question that the physicist Einstein once asked. He said, "The most important question a person can ask is the universe a friendly place?" Not a question about physics. Not a question about mathematics or the speed of light. The most important question, is this a friendly place? Think about what that question really means. Not whether life is always easy. Not whether bad things never happen. But underneath it all, beneath the difficulty and the confusion and the heartbreak, Is there something kind at the center? Is there something that holds us? Something we can rest in? This is not a question you answer with your mind. It is a question you answer with your whole body. And if you sit with it quietly, without rushing toward an answer, you may notice something interesting. There is a part of you that wants to say yes. A part that senses, even faintly, that the universe is not hostile, that the ground beneath you is solid, that the air in your lungs was given freely, that the warmth in your chest right now is not something you manufactured. It was already here. Of course, another part of you might hesitate, might say, well, what about all the hard things? What about the pain? And that is fair. That is honest. The universe does include difficulty. But the question is not whether difficulty exists. The question is whether difficulty is the deepest truth, or whether there is something underneath it, something kinder, something that holds even the hard things in a kind of vast, patient embrace. A tree grows through storms. It does not grow because of the calm weather alone. It grows through everything. And the soil that holds its roots does not withdraw when the wind picks up. It stays. It holds. It belongs to the tree, and the tree belongs to it in all weather. That is the kind of friendliness Einstein was pointing toward. Not the absence of storms, but the presence of ground. In Buddhist teaching, this feeling is sometimes called basic goodness. Not goodness as opposed to badness. Not moral goodness that you have to earn through effort, but a foundational okayness at the heart of things, a warmth that exists before you do anything to deserve it. The earth supports every creature equally, without asking whether they have earned the right to stand on it. The rain falls on all gardens, tended and untended alike. The Dalai Lama, one of the most beloved Buddhist teachers of our time, has a simple refrain that he returns to again and again. He says, "Nobody wants to suffer, and everybody wants to be happy." He says this not as a philosophy but as a fact, a starting point. And he adds that a core ingredient of that happiness is a sense of belonging, of connectedness, of being a part of something larger than ourselves. Let us sit with this for a moment. What does belonging feel like? Not the idea of belonging, not the concept, but the actual feeling in the body when you are somewhere you feel completely at home. Perhaps you have felt it sitting with an old friend in comfortable silence, where nothing needs to be said because everything is already understood. Perhaps in a garden on a warm afternoon, your hands in the soil, the sun on your back, and a feeling that you and the garden are not really separate things at all. Perhaps in a room full of people you love, where no one is performing or pretending, and the laughter comes easy, and you think, this is it. This is what it is supposed to feel like. Or perhaps in a smaller moment, standing at a window in the early morning, watching the light come in, and feeling, just for a breath, that you are exactly where you are meant to be. That nothing is missing. That this ordinary moment is, somehow, complete. In those moments, there is a particular quality. The mind quiets down. The stories about ourselves grow still. There is no monitoring, no measuring, no checking to see how we are doing. The inner narrator takes a break. And in that quiet, something opens. Something warm. Something that feels like it has been there all along, just waiting for the noise to stop so it could be noticed. And notice something else about those moments. Trust is not something you think about. It is simply there. You do not decide to trust. You do not work at it or argue yourself into it. It arrives on its own, like warmth arriving when you step into sunlight. Because belonging and trust are not two separate things. They are two words for the same feeling. When you feel you belong, you trust. When you trust, you feel you belong. They arise together and dissolve together. There is a beautiful image in the Buddhist tradition. It says that our true nature is like the ocean. The surface of the ocean is always changing. Sometimes it is calm and glassy. Sometimes it is wild with storms. Waves rise and crash and disappear. Wind tears across the surface. Rain falls. And from the perspective of the surface, it can seem very dramatic and very frightening. But go a little deeper and everything changes. 20 feet below the surface, the water is still. 50 feet down, it is silent. 100 feet down, it is vast and dark and peaceful, and the storms above are just a distant murmur. The waves are real. The storms are real. The difficulty of life is real. Buddhism has never pretended otherwise. But the ocean is also real. The depth is also real. And you are not only the surface. You are the whole ocean. When you know this, something shifts. The waves do not stop. The storms do not end. But you are no longer afraid of them in the same way, because you know that you are not only the wave that is crashing right now, you are also the stillness beneath it. You are also the vast, quiet deep. This is what trust feels like when it goes all the way down. Not a belief, not a hope, not a decision, but a knowing felt in the body that you are held by something larger than the current difficulty. That beneath the turbulence, there is ground, there is depth, there is home, and you do not have to swim to get there. You do not have to be strong or disciplined or spiritual. You just have to stop fighting the water and let yourself sink gently into what is already here. The depth does not require your effort. It only requires your willingness. This is what the Buddhist tradition calls taking refuge. Not hiding from life, not escaping difficulty, but sinking beneath the surface noise into the quiet truth of what you are. Resting there, trusting that it will hold you, because it always has. The boy at the screen door did not know any Buddhist teaching. He had never heard of basic goodness or the ocean of awareness or the question of whether the universe is friendly. He was just a child who wanted to stay where it was warm. But he knew something true. He knew that belonging is not something you earn by being good enough or clever enough or quiet enough. It is something that happens when someone opens the door and says, simply, "You are welcome here." And sometimes that someone is you. Sometimes you are the one who needs to say it to yourself. You are welcome here. In this body, in this life, in this moment, with all its imperfection and uncertainty. You are welcome. You belong. Not because you have proved anything, but because you are here. And being here is enough. The Buddha said it plainly. He said, "You can search throughout the entire universe for someone who is more deserving of your love and affection than you are yourself, and that person is not to be found anywhere. Not anywhere. You are it. You are the one you have been looking for. And the door has always been open." Let us rest here gently. Feel whatever is present. You belong to this moment, just as it is. Whenever you are ready, we will continue together. Have you ever been blamed for something you did not do and felt guilty anyway? It is one of the strangest things about being human. Someone accuses you of something, and even though you absolutely know that you did not do it, something inside you flinches. Something drops in your stomach. A small voice whispers, "Well, maybe I did. Maybe I am the kind of person who would." This runs deep in us, much deeper than logic, and there is a story that shows it perfectly. Two young brothers, about 8 and 10, were always getting into mischief. Not the harmful kind, just the restless, curious, boundary-testing kind that comes naturally to boys that age. They broke things. They tracked mud through the house. They ate food that was meant for guests and denied it with crumbs still on their faces. Their parents loved them dearly but were running out of ideas. So they arranged for the boys to visit an elder in their community, a serious and respected man who was known for being very good at straightening out young people. The elder agreed to see the boys, but asked to speak with each one separately. So the younger boy went in first. He was led into a large, quiet room. The elder sat behind a heavy wooden desk. The room smelled of old books and polished wood. Everything was very still. The boy sat down in a chair that was slightly too big for him, his feet not quite reaching the floor. The elder looked at him for a long moment. Then he leaned forward and asked, in a deep and serious voice, "Where is God?" The boy stared. He had no idea what to say. His mouth opened and closed. Nothing came out. The elder asked again, more firmly, "Where is God?" The boy gripped the arms of the chair. His eyes went wide. Still nothing. The elder leaned closer, raised his voice, and pointed his finger. "Where is God?" At that, the boy leapt from the chair, bolted out of the room, ran all the way home, flew up the stairs, and dove into a wardrobe, pulling the door shut behind him. His older brother, who had been waiting nervously, followed him in. "What happened?" The older brother whispered through the door. The younger boy's voice came back, breathless and terrified. "We are in big trouble now. God is missing, and they think we did it." It is a warm story, and we can smile at it. But underneath the warmth is something worth noticing. The boy did not take a moment to consider whether he had actually done anything wrong. He did not think it through. The moment someone pointed a finger and raised a voice, his whole body said, "Guilty. I must have done it. Whatever it is, it must be my fault." And we do this too. All of us. Not just with accusations from others, but with the quiet accusations we level at ourselves. The constant background hum of something is not right with me. Not always loud. Sometimes just a whisper, but always there, shaping how we move through the world. Buddhist psychology has a word for this. It is called papanka, which roughly translates to mental proliferation. It is the tendency of the mind to take one small seed of discomfort and spin it into an entire jungle of stories. A seed of doubt becomes a thicket of unworthiness. A seed of embarrassment becomes a forest of shame. And before long, we are lost in the jungle, and we have forgotten that it grew from a single seed. The Buddha saw this clearly. He taught that the sense of being flawed is not something we arrive at through careful observation. It is something that arises automatically, like a reflex. It is built into the machinery of the ego itself. The moment a separate self appears, a sense of something is not quite right appears with it. They are born together like twins. There is an old story about this. One of the oldest stories in the Western world. A man and a woman live in a garden. Everything they need is provided. The air is warm. The fruit is ripe. There is no struggle, no striving, no need to prove anything. They simply are, and it is enough. And then something shifts. They become self-aware. They look at themselves, and for the first time, they feel exposed. They feel naked. Not physically, but in a deeper sense. They feel seen, and the seeing makes them ashamed. And in that shame, they hide. They cover themselves. They make excuses. And they are sent away from the garden, out into a harder world. Now, whatever you believe about this story, whether it is sacred scripture or ancient poetry or something in between, there is a psychological truth in it that runs very deep. It is the story of what happens when an ego is born. The moment we become self-conscious, the moment we begin to watch ourselves and evaluate ourselves, we feel that something has been lost. A kind of innocence, a belonging, an ease. The garden was not a place. It was a state of being. And we left it not because we were punished, but because we started thinking about ourselves. And that thinking created a distance between us and life that was not there before. There was life, and then there was us, watching life, and the gap between those two felt like exile. Every child goes through a version of this. There is a time, early on, when a child does not know where she ends and the world begins. She is the warmth of her mother's arms. She is the sunlight on the floor. She is the sound of birds outside. There is no boundary. And then, gradually, the boundary forms. She learns her name. She learns the word mine. She learns that she is separate. And with that knowledge comes a very quiet grief, so quiet she may never name it, but it shapes everything that follows. This is what the Buddha meant when he taught about the illusion of separation. Not that the self does not exist, but that the self, as we experience it, is a kind of contraction, a tightening, a stepping back from the fullness of life into a small, anxious observation post where we watch and judge and worry. And from that observation post, everything looks threatening, because we are separate now. And if we are separate, we are vulnerable. And if we are vulnerable, we must protect ourselves. And so the whole machinery of defense begins. The scanning for danger, the bracing for impact, the low, constant buzz of something is wrong. This is what scientists now call the negativity bias. And it is not a flaw in you. It is not evidence that you are broken or weak or insufficiently spiritual. It is simply old wiring. Very old. Millions of years old. Our ancestors survived because they paid more attention to threats than to beauty. The ones who heard a rustling in the grass and thought that could be a predator lived longer than the ones who heard it and thought, what a lovely breeze. Over countless generations, the nervous system was shaped by this. Pay attention to what could go wrong. Scan for danger. assume the worst. It kept us alive, but it also left us with a mind that is naturally, habitually drawn to what is wrong. With ourselves, with others, with life. We are carrying survival wiring into a world that, for most of us, is not actually dangerous in the ways our nervous system believes it is. We are still scanning the grass, still bracing for the predator, still flinching at the pointed finger, even when we have done nothing wrong. The Buddhist path does not ask us to override this wiring through force. It does not ask us to pretend we are not afraid. It asks something gentler. It asks us to notice the wiring, to see it clearly, to recognize, there it is again. The old reflex, the automatic guilt, the scan for what is wrong, and then, having noticed it, to not believe it so completely, to hold it with a little space, a little kindness, a little humor even, because the reflex is not the truth. It is just a reflex, and you are so much more than your reflexes. One psychologist made an observation about this that is worth sitting with. He said that human beings resist their own nobility far more fiercely than they resist their own darkness. It is easier, he said, to discover that you are flawed than to discover that you have a profound capacity for goodness. Think about that for a moment. Why would goodness be harder to accept than failure? Because failure is familiar. We know the landscape of our shortcomings. We have maps. We have well-worn paths through that territory. We know where the potholes are and which turns to avoid. We have spent years learning to navigate it. But goodness, real, deep, radiant goodness, that is unfamiliar territory. It asks us to be bigger than our stories. It asks us to step out of the small room we have been living in and into something vast and bright and open. And that can feel more frightening than any failure, because in that openness, there is nothing to hold on to. No walls, no defenses, just the wide, clear sky of what we actually are. And yet, this is exactly what the Buddhist tradition invites us toward. Not through force, not through self-improvement, but through a gentle turning of attention. Instead of asking, "What is wrong with me?" we begin to ask, "What is already whole?" Instead of searching for the flaw, we start to notice what is already shining. The Buddha did not teach that we need to become good. He taught that we need to recognize the goodness that is already here, buried under the wiring, hidden behind the reflexes, covered over by years and years of scanning for what is wrong. It is like a lamp that has been covered with a cloth for a long time. The cloth is dusty. It has been there so long that we have forgotten there is a lamp underneath. We think the room is just dim. We think dimness is normal. But the light has not gone out. It has never gone out. It has just been covered. And the work is not to create the light. It was never about creating anything. The work is to gently, patiently lift the cloth. And when we do, we are not surprised by what we find. We are reminded, oh, yes, there it is. It was here all along. So if you notice tonight, or tomorrow, or sometime next week, that old familiar feeling rising up, the sense that something is wrong with you, that you are not enough, that you have done something you cannot quite name, but feel responsible for anyway, see if you can pause, just for a moment, and recognize it for what it is. It is old wiring. It is the boy in the big chair, flinching at the pointed finger. It is the man and the woman in the garden, suddenly aware of themselves and ashamed. It is not the truth. The truth is quieter. The truth is underneath the reflex, underneath the story, underneath the guilt. And it says something very different. It says, you are not in trouble. Nothing is missing. And no one thinks you did it. You are fine. You have always been fine. The garden was never taken from you. You just forgot you were still in it. Let us pause here. Let whatever you are feeling settle gently, like leaves coming to rest on still water. There is no rush. And whenever you feel ready, we will continue on together. There is something that happens to us when someone truly sees us. Not when they look at us. People look at us all the time. They see our clothes, our face, our role, the mask we are wearing that day. But every now and then, someone sees through all of that. They see something real, something true. And in that moment, something inside us softens that we did not even know was hard. A Buddhist teacher once said, "The greatest gift you can give another person is to see them clearly and let them know what you see. Not flattery, not politeness, but real seeing. The kind that makes the other person feel, for just a moment, that they are known, that they belong, that what they are is good." Tonight, let us explore a story about exactly that. There was a teacher in a small school. She taught mathematics to a class of young students, about 12 or 13 years old. They had known each other for years, these children. They had grown up together. They sat in the same classrooms, played in the same yards, passed through the same hallways season after season. They knew each other's names and faces and habits. But as children that age often do, they had also begun to find each other difficult. The easy friendships of younger years were giving way to something more complicated. There were cliques forming. There were rivalries. There were days when the room felt tense and prickly before the lesson even began. One morning, the class was struggling with a particularly hard concept. The numbers were not making sense. Frustration was building. One student sighed loudly. Another put his head on the desk. A girl near the window stared out at the trees, as if willing herself somewhere else entirely. The teacher watched all of this. She knew this was not really about mathematics. Something was knotted up in the room, something that had been tightening for weeks. And in that moment, she made a decision that had nothing to do with the curriculum. She stopped the lesson. "Put your books away," she said. "We are going to do something different today." She asked each student to take out 2 sheets of paper. Then she asked them to write down the name of every classmate, leaving space between each name. "And in that space," she said, "write the nicest thing you can think of about that person." The room went quiet. Not the tense quiet of frustration, but a different kind. A thoughtful kind. Pencils moved slowly at first, then faster. Some students chewed their lips, thinking. Some smiled as they wrote. A few glanced up at classmates across the room, as if seeing them for the first time in a long while. When they were finished, they handed in their papers and went home for the weekend. Over the next 2 days, the teacher sat at her kitchen table and did something painstaking and beautiful. She took each student's name and compiled every kind thing their classmates had written about them onto a single sheet. 1 sheet per student. A portrait made entirely of goodness, written by the people who knew them best. It took hours. Her tea went cold more than once. But as she worked, she found herself moved by what these young people had written about each other. Beneath the rivalries and the awkwardness, they saw each other with a clarity that surprised her. They noticed things she had not noticed. They found words for qualities she had sensed but could not name. Reading their words, she felt as if she was seeing her students for the first time, through each other's eyes. On Monday morning, she handed each student their list. The room changed. It changed in a way that was difficult to describe but impossible to miss. Something opened. Something that had been clenched went soft. She heard small sounds. A sharp breath drawn in. A whispered, "Really?" One boy read his list 3 times, his finger tracing the words as if he needed to touch them to believe they were real. A girl near the back pressed her paper against her chest and closed her eyes. Another student, a boy who rarely spoke in class and kept mostly to himself, looked up from his list with an expression she had never seen on his face before. It was surprise. Not at what the list said, exactly, but at the fact that anyone had noticed him at all. "I did not know anyone thought that about me," he said quietly. The teacher smiled. "Now you know," she said. The class was different after that day. Not perfect. They were still young, still learning, still stumbling through the complicated territory of growing up. But something had shifted. A thread had been drawn between them that had not been there before. Or perhaps it had always been there, invisible and fine, and they had simply needed someone to point it out. The list reminded them of what they already knew but had been too busy, too self-conscious, too afraid to say. Years passed. The students graduated. They went their separate ways, as young people do. They moved to different places, started different lives, fell in love, made mistakes, grew up. Some kept in touch. Others drifted apart. The teacher stayed in her school, teaching new classes, new faces, new names. She thought of her old students sometimes, wondered how they were, hoped they were well. But the years have a way of carrying people far from each other, and she did not know how deeply that single lesson had traveled with them. And then one day, she received a message. One of her former students, a young man she had been especially fond of, had passed away. He had been a kind and gentle person, the sort who carried more inside him than he showed. The kind of person who listened more than he spoke, and whose presence in a room made everyone feel a little steadier. The kind of person you remembered long after the conversation ended. She went to the gathering that was held in his memory. Many of her former students were there, older now, changed by time and life. And during the gathering, the young man's father approached her. He wanted to show her something. He reached into his pocket and took out a wallet. From inside it, he carefully unfolded 2 pieces of paper. They were worn soft at the creases. They had been taped and refolded many times. She recognized them immediately. It was the list. The one she had given him all those years ago. He had carried it with him. She could not speak for a moment. And then, one by one, the others began to say what they had never said before. "I still have mine," one woman said. "It is in my desk drawer. I read it when things feel hard." "Mine is in our family album," said another. "I keep mine in my diary," said a third. And another took out her own wallet and showed the group her list, just as worn, just as carefully folded. They stood together in the quiet of that room, holding their lists, holding each other's words, and they cried. Not from sadness alone, from the fullness of knowing that they had been seen, that someone, long ago, had taken the time to notice what was good about them, and that they had carried that seeing with them through all the years since, like a candle in a lantern, quiet and steady and never quite going out. There is a word in the Buddhist tradition that captures what happened in that classroom. The word is namaste. It is used as a greeting, but its meaning runs much deeper than hello. It means something close to, I see the sacred in you. The light in me recognizes the light in you. Not the role, not the performance, not the mask, the light. And what the teacher did, without knowing the word or the tradition behind it, was exactly this. She created a space in which her students could practice namaste with each other. She asked them to look past the surface, past the cliques and the competition and the carefully maintained cool of being 13 years old, and see what was really there. And what they found, in every single case, was something good. This should not surprise us. In the Buddhist understanding, goodness is not something rare or special that only certain people possess. It is the ground of every being. It is what is there when the layers of defense and habit and self-doubt are gently peeled away. You do not have to go looking for it. You do not have to dig deep or try hard. You just have to be willing to see it. And when you see it in another person and let them know, something shifts in both of you. In them, because they feel seen, and in you, because seeing goodness in others reconnects you with the goodness in yourself. And here is what is remarkable. When someone sees our goodness and mirrors it back to us, it does not create the goodness. It was already there. But the mirroring helps us believe it. It helps us belong to it. It helps us come home to a part of ourselves that we had quietly given up on. This is what a parent does when they look into the eyes of their child and see not a problem to be solved, but a being to be loved. The child does not learn, I am good because my parent says so. The child learns, I am good and someone else can see it too. That second part matters more than we realize. There is an ancient root to the word good in English. The oldest form of the word is connected to the idea of belonging, of being joined, of being part of something. To feel good, in the oldest sense, is to feel that you belong. And to feel that you belong is to feel that you are good. They are the same feeling, arrived at from different directions. And this is why the list mattered so much to those students. It was not vanity. It was not ego. It was the deep human need to know that you are part of something, that you are seen, that what you are contributes something valuable to the people around you. The Buddha taught that we are all connected, that separation is an illusion, that the boundary between self and other is drawn by the mind and not by reality. But sometimes that teaching is too large to hold. Sometimes we need something smaller and simpler. Sometimes we need a piece of paper with our name on it, folded carefully in a wallet, carried close to the heart. Sometimes that is enough to remind us that we belong. So if you are listening tonight, and there is someone in your life whose goodness you have noticed but never mentioned, consider this a gentle nudge. Not a grand gesture, not a speech, just a simple, honest word. I see you. I appreciate you. You matter. You would be surprised how far those words travel, how long they last, how carefully they are kept. And if you are listening tonight and you are not sure anyone has noticed your goodness, consider this: you are not the best judge of that. You carry your own list, whether you know it or not. It is written in the faces that light up when you walk into a room, in the friend who calls you first when something matters, in the small moments of kindness you have offered without thinking, that you have already forgotten, but that someone else never will. The Buddha said, thousands of candles can be lit from a single candle, and the life of that candle will not be shortened. Happiness never decreases by being shared. Your goodness is that candle. It does not diminish when others see it. It grows brighter. Let us pause here. Let these words settle into whatever quiet place inside you is ready to receive them. There is no hurry. And whenever you are ready, we will take one last step together. A poet from an ancient tradition once made a quiet observation about human beings. He said, admit something. Everyone you see, you say to them, silently, love me. Not out loud, of course. Not in words, but in the eyes. In the way we lean slightly towards someone who is kind to us. In the way we soften when someone remembers our name. In the small, almost invisible reaching that happens every time we enter a room full of people, searching, always searching, for the face that says, I am glad you are here. And then this poet asked a question. He said, why not become the one who lives with a full moon in each eye, who is always saying, with that sweet moon language, what every other eye in this world is longing to hear? A full moon in each eye. What would it look like to walk through your life that way? Not trying to get love, but giving it. Not searching for the face that sees you, but becoming the face that sees everyone. There is a story about a woman who went to live in a spiritual community. She was young, earnest, and deeply sincere about her practice. She wanted to wake up. She wanted to be free. She wanted to become the kind of person who radiated peace and kindness without effort. And she tried very hard. She meditated early each morning while the stars were still out. She studied the teachings. She followed the guidelines of the community carefully. And for a while, she felt she was making progress. There were moments of calm, moments of clarity, moments when the world seemed bright and open and full of possibility. But then, something else began to happen. She started noticing herself, not in the gentle, curious way that Buddhist practice encourages, but in a harsh, watchful way. She began to see her ego everywhere. In her meditation, she noticed how she compared herself to others. In her conversations, she noticed how she steered things toward herself. In the yoga classes the community offered, she noticed how she pushed herself not for the sake of practice, but to be impressive. And each time she noticed, she judged. There it is again. The selfishness, the vanity, the need to be special. She began to feel that no matter how much she practiced, underneath it all, she was fundamentally self-centered. That the ego she was trying to dissolve was actually the most real thing about her. That she was, at the core, not good. One day, she went to a small gathering of fellow practitioners and said something she had never said aloud before. I do not trust myself, she said. I think at the root of me, I am selfish, and I do not know what to do about it. She could not remember what anyone said in response. The admission was so large, so raw, that her whole body was humming with it. She went back to her room and sat down on her bed and let herself feel what she had been running from. It came in waves. First, the judgment, the sharp, clear voice that said, "You are not good enough. You have always been pretending." Then, underneath that, something softer, a deep ache, a kind of grief at having to live inside a story of being flawed, at having spent so many years policing herself, watching herself, finding herself wanting. She let it come. She did not try to fix it, or explain it, or make it go away. She just breathed and felt it, and let it be there, like rain falling on a roof. You cannot stop rain. You can only let it fall. And then, as she sat with the grief, something underneath it began to emerge. Something she had not expected. It was quiet, not dramatic. More like a door opening in a room she did not know existed. Underneath the grief, underneath the judgment, underneath all the stories about her ego and its failings, there was something else. A spaciousness, a quality of awareness that was holding all of it, the vanity, the self-criticism, the grief, the longing, without being any of it. It was not fighting the waves. It was not trying to calm them. It was simply there, vast and still and kind, like the sky holding every kind of weather without being troubled by any of it. She sat in that spaciousness for a long time. The waves kept moving. The thoughts kept arising. But she was no longer only the waves. She was also what held them. And from that place of holding, everything looked different. The first was that she was not her ego. The patterns were there, yes. The selfishness, the competitiveness, the need for approval, they were real. But they were not the whole of her. They were waves on the surface of something much deeper and much more still. The second thing was a kind of prayer. Not a prayer to anything outside herself. A prayer to remember. To keep coming back to this spaciousness. To not get lost in the waves and forget the ocean. Because in that spaciousness, the question of trust dissolved. There was no separate self to trust or mistrust. There was just awareness. Open, warm, unbroken. And in that awareness, she was home. There is a teaching from the Tibetan Buddhist tradition that speaks directly to this. It says, "O nobly born, O you of glorious origins, remember your radiant true nature, the essence of mind. Trust it. Return to it. It is home. Remember. Not become. Not achieve. Not earn. Remember. Because according to this tradition, our deepest nature is already radiant, already awake, already whole. We have simply forgotten, the way we forget a dream upon waking. The way a pond forgets it is clear when the surface is disturbed by wind. But the clarity is still there. The wind passes. The surface settles. And there it is, just as it always was, shining. The woman in our story did not become enlightened that afternoon. She would be the first to tell you that. She still noticed her ego. She still caught herself competing, comparing, reaching for approval. But something had changed. She held those patterns differently, with more space. with more humor, with the quiet confidence of someone who has seen what is underneath and knows it is good. And this is not a story about one extraordinary person. This is a story about what happens whenever anyone, anywhere, is willing to stop running from themselves and simply sit with what is there. The spaciousness is not special. It is not reserved for monks or saints or people on retreats. It is the ground of every being. It is what you are made of. And it is available right now, in this breath, if you are willing to let everything else be still for a moment. There is a finding from modern science that the Buddhist tradition would smile at. Researchers have discovered that when a person imagines something vividly, the brain responds almost identically to when the person actually experiences it. The same regions light up, the same rhythms change, the same chemistry flows. To the brain, imagining and experiencing are remarkably close to the same thing. This means something important for us tonight. If you imagine, even briefly, that you are whole, your nervous system begins to respond as if you are. If you imagine that you are safe, something in your body begins to relax. If you imagine that you belong, that you are part of this living world, that there is a radiant awareness shining through you right now, quietly, steadily, without needing your permission, then something in you begins to open. Not because you are pretending, but because you are practicing the truth. You are rehearsing what is already real. And each time you rehearse it, the path becomes more familiar. The ground becomes more solid. The way home becomes easier to find. This is what the Buddhist tradition has been saying for thousands of years, and what science is now beginning to confirm. That attention shapes reality. Where you place your attention, that is what grows. If you spend your days scanning for what is wrong, wrongness is what you will find. If you begin, even gently, to notice what is whole, what is kind, what is luminous, that is what will grow. Not because you are ignoring the difficulty, but because you are finally giving equal time to the truth that has been patiently waiting beneath it. The Buddha taught that awakening is not something that happens to us from outside. It is something that unfolds from within, like a flower that has been waiting for warmth. And the signs of it are simpler than we might think. The longing to be honest, the yearning to love more fully, the moments of quiet awe when you look at the sky, or hold the hand of someone you care about, or hear music that moves you in ways you cannot explain. The quiet appreciation for the goodness in another person. These are all signs. They are the radiant nature shining through the cracks, and they are everywhere once you begin to look. So let us return one last time to the poet's question. What would it look like to live with a full moon in each eye? It would not look dramatic. It would not look spiritual or holy or set apart. It would look ordinary, beautifully, quietly ordinary. It would look like seeing the person behind the role, like noticing the goodness that others have forgotten about themselves, like walking through an ordinary day, a street, a shop, a quiet room, and sensing that every face you pass is carrying the same longing you carry. The longing to belong, the longing to be seen, the longing to know that what they are is enough. It would look like the teacher at her kitchen table, compiling lists of goodness, like the elder's wife, warmly telling the boy at the screen door to come back in, like the friend who pointed to the spire in the desert and said, You can see this from anywhere, and it would look like offering that seeing wherever you can, in whatever small way is available. Not as a grand project, not as a spiritual accomplishment you can add to your list of virtues, but as the most natural thing in the world. Because when you know that you are the ocean, kindness is what flows. When you know that you belong, generosity is what arises. When you trust your own radiant nature, seeing it in others is as easy as breathing. The whole of the Buddhist path leads here. Not to a monastery, not to a mountaintop, not to a state of consciousness that only a few can reach, but here, to this simple, human willingness to see and be seen, to love and let yourself be loved, to walk through the world with your eyes open and your heart soft, offering to others what you most needed to receive. The Buddha said, at the moment of his deepest realization, wonder of wonders, all beings already possess the wholeness and wisdom of the awakened mind. It is only because of their attachments and fears that they do not recognize it. All beings, not some, not the worthy ones, not the ones who have meditated longest or suffered most gracefully. All beings, you, the person you love, the person you struggle with, the stranger on the street, the child asleep in the next room. All of you, all of us, already whole, already luminous, already home. We just need reminding from time to time. And that is what tonight has been. A gentle reminder, a folded list in a wallet, a friend pointing to the spire, a small dog pulling aside the curtain, a child asking, "You mean they forgot?" You did not forget forever. You are remembering now. Let us rest here. Let everything settle. You have come a long way tonight, and there is nothing left to do. Just breathe. Just be. Just rest in the quiet truth that you are whole, and you are held, and you belong. We have walked a long way together tonight, through stories and teachings, through gardens and deserts, through classrooms and rivers and old ceremonies around a fire. We have sat with the small dog who pulled aside the curtain. We have listened to the child who could not believe that grown-ups forget how to draw. We have stood at a screen door in the evening light, and we have been invited back in. And through it all, one thread has held everything together. A quiet truth, spoken in 100 different ways by the Buddha, by Zen masters, by poets, by children, by the ancient traditions that have carried this wisdom across the centuries. You are okay. You belong. You are whole. Not because you have fixed yourself, not because you have arrived at some perfect understanding, but because wholeness was never something you had to earn. It was something you were born with, something you carry in every cell, something that shines through you even now, in the quiet of this moment, as gently and steadily as starlight. So let it all go now. Let the stories settle. Let the teachings rest. You do not need to remember any of it. What matters has already found its way in. It is already part of you, folded carefully, like a list in a wallet, like a love letter you wrote to yourself a long time ago and are only now beginning to read. There is nothing more to do, nowhere else to be. You are home. Sleep well, and thank you for joining us here at Midnight Monk.